Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com for all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Starz TV series and anything interesting that falls between. This is podcast episode 177, and we are on installment 13 of the Fiery Cross read-along. This week we're covering chapters 23 through 25. And Starz announced yesterday that we will be seeing the production back in early 2020. That was my guess, so it gives us plenty of time to get this read-along finished before the show comes back on. Also of note from that announcement, Claire has a new coat. It's beautiful, so does Jamie. And Jamie no longer has bangs. Let's everybody just have a silent moment for that. He finally has a fantastic wig. Yay! So we won't have to complain about his bangs anymore moving forward, hopefully. There was another interesting thing that happened. There is an article that was meant for industry people. Well, the speech was meant for industry people. Thank you, Aaron, for saying that today. And it really has caused a little bit of aggravation in the women audience who Starz really is trying to go after and build as part of their brand. But some of the things that were said were somewhat condescending. And I think that the Starz powers that be are missing some of the point and what the female viewers really do want. And there were some comments that I think hit the nail on the head, meaning, yeah, do you want to see, Jamie shirtless? Well, why not, right? Sam's a good-looking man. We love our Jamie character, but that stuff doesn't matter at all without the emotional connection, without the bonding, without all the oomph to hold it up, so to speak. We're not just watching to see Sam, aka Jamie, partially dressed. And another thought is that women do not prefer to have complex shows. Okay, which I don't think is correct at all. I think there's a huge reader base of Outlander that has followed the show, which made it basically an instant hit. And if women did not like complex characters and scenarios and storylines, they wouldn't read Outlander. It is not the simplest read. There's a lot to follow. And there's a depth of character development as for all the characters that we see over time. And storylines are not taken lightly. They take time. So I don't understand why anyone would think that women viewers would want something that was a little lighter hearted. I would say nothing about Outlander. All the books, the side books, are light. They're not. We like that. There are threads that go throughout, and you have to think and you have to immerse yourself a bit. It isn't lighthearted reading. So I hope that the feedback that Starz is getting from that article coming out, even if it wasn't meant for the consumer, I hope they actually hear what the consumers of their product are saying, and that they don't just hear what they want to hear and give us what they think we want. Okay. Because this fandom is very, very, very clear on what they want. All right. And yes, we all know they're different mediums, etc. That's why I don't usually talk about the two together, because they're different universes. But it doesn't mean that we cannot critique, and with the product that is being put out, we want it to be a solid, great product. We want it to go through all the books. We don't want it just to stop. And the material that's being adapted is high quality. So there's no reason that we can't have a high quality show, not just how pretty it is, not just how good looking the actors are. Like, we want the writing to be as quality in the adaptation and the journey it takes us on as Diana Gabaldon's writing. And if the show, like Game of Thrones, even though, yes, there were mass departures from some characters, there were characters that were combined, there were things that were different. Heck, George R.R. Martin hasn't even written or completed writing the end of the story. So his end is going to be totally different than the show. And that's fine. The gripes that people had were because it just seemed heavy-handed, and some of it seemed just to fall flat, and that there wasn't time in that truncated final season to really finish the story in the way that the story deserved to be finished. So we don't want that. We want it to be something that we want to go back to. And I would like to hear your thoughts, because for me, as I've said before multiple times, is that I don't consider Outlander to be a feminist mantra. That's not Claire's point of view. She wants women to have, of course, their rights and to do what they need to be able to do and to accomplish and thrive, etc. But she doesn't go trying to light the world on fire, and she's not marching in the 18th century trying to get women all these rights that they don't have. She also understands culture most of the time. I mean, it was because of her upbringing with Uncle Lamb that she knows how people live and that they live differently. She's simply breaking the mold for herself. Now, if that positively affects somebody else's life, great. She raised her daughter to be that way. So now you have two women. Well, if you don't count all the things that Galis Duncan did, but you have these two women out of their own time who are directly impacting other people's lives, but their force of will is not to be this strong feminine lead, and have a really distinctive feminist point of view. They don't. Brianna happens to be highly traditional in a lot of ways. So does Claire. And even though some things rub them wrong, they're not fighting against the system to change the system. They want to be able to do things as they want to do them, as they need to do them, and that their drive forces them to do. But that whole aspect of it to me is just overwrought. And just give us good characters. Show us these wonderful women, but we don't have to sacrifice the men in the storylines at all. And I think that Diana Gabaldon does a very good job at presenting partnerships and strong characters, and one doesn't have to be weaker than the other. They were improved by each other. One doesn't take a back seat per se. So I think if the writing team focused on that, on the partnership ideals and how they can elevate each other in relationship, because Outlander's about relationship at the heart of it. It's not just about adventure and them getting into trouble and not staying home very long. It's about commitment. It's about conviction. It's about honor. It's about loyalty. It's about relationship. And if that was focused on, you can't lose in an adaptation because of the principles the stories are based on already. So anyway, there's my $1.25. I've been rambling at you for like 8 minutes, so we can move forward now. So in these chapters, we're getting into something interesting here. Now, Fiery Cross, I really see as the book, or a good portion of the book, is really about life. It's about daily life. It gives us those nuances so we can really put ourselves at the ridge. We understand the relationships that are being shown to us. We're seeing the nitty-gritty, the things that if you have had children that you remember when they were small, or if your children are small, you remember those daily things that are just difficult. And I love that Diana shows it in a way that gives it humor and gives texture to the characters, and we can almost reach into the words and we can touch Brianna and Roger. And we feel for baby Jimmy when he's teething and just what a pistol he's being for his mom. And we get it. The hardships that are there in daily life when you can't be more than a little ways away from your baby. And at this point, Jimmy, we're looking at, December? So he's getting bigger now. I mean, he's about 6.5, 7 months old. And so he's going to be really busy. He's probably crawling. He's eating regular food, but he's nursing still primarily. He's teething. It's a lot, right? But I love how we really get to see what is happening in day-to-day life. Like, we need to have that foundation, because as Jamie and Claire are going to, and Roger are going to launch into an adventure, they have to go because of the regulators, that we really need to be bound to the ridge. We need to know that life is going on. Even if it gives them a little bit of hesitation, each of them probably at some level, that they're not going to be there, especially Claire, that everything's moving. Whether or not they're there, there's a vibrancy there, and we need to have that touchstone because we need to know there's a reason for them to go home. There's a reason for all the things that are going on. And I love to go and have adventures, but I love to come home. As long as I have a home base that's mine and no one's going to take it, I could go do all sorts of things knowing that my peace is here. And it's my space, it's my house, no matter how fancy or how plain. It's where I get to come home and feel like I belong, right? And so we really have to have those textures and those reminders and those touchstones as we get into the story, because it takes some pretty wild turns along the way. And we're about to enter one of those. So chapter 23 is the Bard. Obviously, the Bard, we're talking about Roger, right? So Roger has been trying to locate families, and he's been all over creation in the area. He comes back, and he's kind of a mess. He's fallen off his horse. There's a rent in his coat. He's not tidy at all. And there's the big event tonight before they gather up men and go to the site where there's the battle with the regulators, with this standoff is going to happen. So Roger's like back, and he's, hearth and home and food, and he's hungry and he's tired, and he gets in there, and Brianna's just a mess. I mean, I remember these days from having young children where, try as you might some days, there's just spit up on your clothes and you haven't had a chance to make food, and the baby or children and baby have taken every second of your day, and everybody's a mess. So this is really the domestic bliss that we get to walk in on at this point. So Roger's unable to find this particular family. He has no idea where they went. So it's time to get ready for the festivities this evening. So he comes in and asks for a kiss. And, he looks her over. And he's like, is the baby teething still? Which is really, really cute. And she's just a mess. The baby will not, eat very much, and he's spitting up, and he's fussing at her, and he's whining at her. She says it's like wrestling alligators. So Roger notices that there's a tartan there. And he's like, what's that for? And she says, oh, it's yours. So this is a shindig tonight he's got to get ready for. So they just are talking about normal things as they go about their business. And he has to get ready. And I can't remember which episode it is right now. I didn't have a chance to go back and look. But where Jamie traditionally puts on his kilt. Well, Roger is doing that in this scene. And so it's pretty funny. And Brianna laughs at it, Roger laughs, and he finally gets himself put together, even though it was somewhat undignified getting there. And I love what Brianna says. See, Daddy? Pretty Daddy. She turned Jemmy, who stared open-mouthed at the vision of male glory before him, and blossomed into a wide, slow smile, a trickle of drool hanging from the pouting curve of his lip. Roger was still hungry, sore, and tired, but it didn't seem so important. He grinned and held out his arms toward the baby. So then he asked Brianna if she needs to change. You think I need fixing up, do you? She gives him an austere look down her long, straight nose. Oh. And then he says, oh, you look great. I love that. Trying to cover up. So he's going to take the baby and head up to the big house so Brianna can get ready. And then she says, don't forget your guitar. And he has no idea that Jamie basically wants him to go and be the bard and to sing and prepare the crowd, right? And Jamie has a pretty inspiring music list that he wants Roger to sing. So I put all the links for the songs listed in this chapter for YouTube videos at the bottom of the written post. So it's Ho Row and Bernie Boozle and The Great Silky, Killy Cranky, etc. So really the only things he doesn't want Roger to sing are songs from the 45, that terrible loss. Anything leading up to it is okay. I like how they talk about the warmongering stuff. And it surprises Roger because since Jamie took that blow to his head, he's pretty much tone deaf, but he is very savvy and he knows people and he sizes people up really well. Having seen Roger's effect on people, Jamie wants that effect because, again, he is not their clan chief. He's not their war chieftain. He is asking these people who are living on the ridge, his land, or in his area, to come and follow him. They need to be inspired and bonded to him. And that's a tricky, tricky business. And we've already discussed that, but Jamie is full well aware that in this circumstance, people don't have to be there. And unless there is a absolute willingness and agreement to go, they won't go, or they'll turn around halfway. They'll get cold feet. They'll decide that they need to be back at their own crofts, doing what they need. So Roger is pretty enthused as Bree changes because, again, like I've said before, lactating breasts are very nice breasts. And he's momentarily enthralled before heading up to the house. And then a really uncomfortable topic comes up, and that is the cross in the yard. It made Claire uncomfortable, makes Brianna uncomfortable, and Brianna's shocked that Jamie's actually going to burn the cross. And Roger goes on to explain it. Well, not burn it all the way, no. Taking down his bowrin with his free hand and flicking a finger against the drumhead to check the tautness, he explained briefly the tradition of the fiery cross. It's a rare thing, he concluded, moving the drum out of Jemmy's grasping reach. I don't think it was ever done in the Highlands again after the Rising. Your father told me he'd seen it once, though. It's something really special to see it done here. Flushed with historical enthusiasm, he didn't notice at once that Brianna seemed slightly less eager. Maybe so, she said uneasily. I don't know. It sort of gives me the creeps. Eh? Why? She shrugged, pulling the crumpled shift off over her head. I don't know. Maybe it's just that I have seen burning crosses on the evening news on TV. You know, the KKK. Or do you know? Maybe they didn't report things like that on television in Britain. The Ku Klux Klan. Roger was less interested in fanatical bigots than in the sight of Brianna's bare breasts, but made an effort to focus on the conversation. Oh, I heard of them. Where'd you think they got the notion? What? You mean? Sure, he said cheerfully. They got it from the Highland immigrants, from whom they were descended by. That's why they called it clan, aye? Come to think. It could be this tonight. That's the link. The occasion that brings the custom from the old world to the new. I mean, wouldn't that be something? Something? Brianna echoed faintly. She pulled on a fresh shift and now shook out a clean dress of blue linen, looking uneasy. Everything starts somewhere, Brie, he said more gently. Most often, we don't know where or how. Does it matter if this time we do? And the Ku Klux Klan won't get started for 100 years from now, at least. It won't be us who sees it, or even we Jeremiah here. Maybe not even his son. Great, she said dryly, pulling on her stays and reaching for the laces. So, our great-grandson can end up being the Grand Dragon. Roger laughed. Aye, maybe so. Before tonight. It's your father. I know that was lengthy for me to read, but just to get that little tidbit, I did not post a link to the history of the Ku Klux Klan. If any of you all want to look it up, feel free. That is not a search that I really felt like doing. However, yes, it is called that because they were immigrant descendants. We do know that. And it's a bastardization of a tradition, the burning cross. It is not something that those in the Highlands did. They weren't killing people in the same way that the Ku Klux Klan would kill people and hunt people down, etc. So that's a tough piece of history. They still exist today, not with nearly the power that they had in mid-last century. It's a blight. It's a stain. And when you live in a country that has freedom of speech, that means people who you abjectly find disdainful and a horror and wrong and harmful still have the legal right to assemble and to use their voices. Now, the things that they were doing that were illegal, murder, etc., harassment, all of those things, destruction, that's totally not in the freedom of speech. So I'm not condoning any of it. I find it despicable and horrifying. Just so you know where I stand on that. But Roger isn't wrong that things start somewhere. So I love that exchange between them. And we get to see kind of that urge from Roger. He would love to be able to have a few minutes with her alone, have a quick little romp. It's different when you have littles. You don't get to languish in bed. You don't get to pick your times. And especially since now he has to be the bard and he's supposed to be the one to be the opening act, so to speak. There's not time. And he needs to go and he's duty bound to do this service for Jamie and to be there on time and be appropriate. So chapter 24 is playing with fire. So as I said, Roger warmed the crowd up for Jamie's main event. So Roger wasn't quite sure what the expectation of this event was, but they basically had a lot of food and drink, and all the people were there, and they were eating, and he starts singing, and the first song he sings is Cranky. And the crowd loves him. And Roger, by the way, is still hungry. It has been more than an hour, and the moon was rising. And he paused just for a moment because he knows how you can affect a crowd by putting in those pregnant pauses. And he knows how to stir them. But while he was singing, he could still feel that cross behind him. And he's watching as Jamie's kind of in the crowd, mingling with people, introducing himself into conversation, making sure he's said hello to every single person who was there. Jamie can work a crowd, and he's a good political. Even though he doesn't like it, he's like born to it, right? So he notices that Jamie is now ready. He does one more song, gets everybody involved, and they all get singing, and the crowd is completely involved by the final chorus. And then he finishes to great applause. So it's interesting that the one thing that Roger thinks will be totally useless as a skill in the 18th century, and Jamie not liking music at all or really appreciating it for itself as an art form, it is important, the skill in bringing people together. And again, binding them in some capacity. When we enjoy music and when we're singing and we're in a crowd and you're actually sharing endorphins and oxytocin, when you're breaking bread with people, when you're laughing, if you're touching, your bodies are touching somehow, you're sharing oxytocin and endorphins. So you're sharing happy drugs and bonding drugs that our bodies use all the time. So that's fascinating to me. So it's part of that. Though Jamie knows nothing about oxytocin and endorphins, nothing about any of those things. He knows what happens in a group and how you bring cohesion and how you go from individuals to people actually being a group as a whole. So Roger finishes. Brianna's impressed with him. And she's like, I'll go get you some food. Poor guy hasn't eaten all day. He's ready since he left in the morning. He's holding the baby and waiting for Brianna to come back. And she comes back with a plate of what sounds like delicious food, pork and apple fritters and roasted potatoes. I'm like, yes. And some beer. That sounds quite delicious, absolutely. But I love Roger's vantage point. See, very beginning, if you remember, way back to the first Outlander book, it's all clear. And then we start getting Jamie's perspective in the second book. And then we get mixed perspectives. Right? And here, we're really getting Roger's vantage point. And I love how Diana kind of wove in different perspectives. And they increase through the books. It's almost like as you know one voice well, she adds another one in. And that's beautiful. It can't be one note. It's always changing, and it's a very dynamic way of writing. So here's how Roger sees Jamie. He stood tall and broad-shouldered in his best gray gentleman's coat, kilted below in soft blue tartan, his hair loose and blazing on his shoulders, with a small warrior's plait down one side, adorned with a single feather. Wow, That must be stunning. Firelight glinted from the knurled gold hilt of his dirk and the brooch that held his looped plaid. He looked pleasant enough, but his manner overall was serious, intent. He made a good show and knew it. The crowd quieted within seconds, men elbowing their more garrulous neighbors to silence. "You ken well enough what we're about here, aye?" he asked without preamble. He raised his hand in which he held the governor's crumpled summons, the red smear of its official seal visible in the leaping firelight. There was a rumble of agreement. The crowd was still cheerful, blood and whiskey coursing freely through their veins. "We are called in duty. We come in honor to serve the cause of law and the governor." Everybody gets excited, and especially Gerhard Mueller. "Ja, long liebe Governor." I don't know how you say governor with a German accent. If somebody could help. And so Jamie waits. Again, he pauses to build that tension. "In the Highlands of Scotland, when a chieftain would set himself for war," he said, his tone casually conversational but pitched to be heard throughout the dooryard, "he would burn the fiery cross and send it for a sign through the lands of his clan. It was a signal to the men of his name to gather their weapons and come to the gathering place prepared for battle." There was a stir in the midst of the crowd, a brief nudging, and more cries of approval, though these were more subdued. A few men had seen this, or at least knew what he was talking about. The rest raised their chins and craned their necks, mouths half open in interest. "But this is a new land, and while we are friends," he smiled at Gerhard Mueller. "Ja, Freund, neighbors, and countrymen." A look at the Lindsay brothers. "And we will be companions in arms. We are not clan. Well, I am given command. I am not your chief." And Roger thinks, the hell you aren't. Or well on your way to it, any road. So Roger is just as enthralled. He hasn't taken a bite of his food. And Jamie picks up the torch. "Let God witness, hear our willingness, and may God strengthen our arms." He paused to let the Germans catch up. "But let this fiery cross stand as a testament to our honor, to invoke God's protection for our families until we come home safe again." He turned and touched the torch to the upright of the cross, holding it until the dry bark caught, and a small flame grew and glimmered from the dark wood. It was big and solid and would burn slowly, this cross, halfway through the night, lighting the dooryard as the men gathered beneath it, talking, eating, drinking, beginning the process of becoming what Jamie Fraser meant them to be, friends, neighbors, companions in arms, under his command. "We cannot say what may befall us. God grant us courage," he said very simply. "God grant us wisdom. If it be his will, may he grant us peace. We ride in the morning." He turned then and left the fire, glancing to find Roger as he did so. Roger nodded back, swallowed to clear his throat, and began to sing softly from the darkness, the opening to the song Jamie had wanted to finish the proceedings, "The Flower of Scotland." "O flower of Scotland, when will we see your like again, that fought and died for your wee bit hill and glen?" This one was of remembrance, pride, and determination. "And stood against him, proud Edward's army, and sent him homeward. Tae, think again." And then the Scottish members in the crowd began to sing, "And sent him homeward. Tae, think again." And as Roger's singing, he starts thinking about the famous people, famous to them in the future, who they might meet. Washington, Jefferson, John Adams, who? And the quote from John Adams that stuck in his mind, "I am a warrior, that my son may be a merchant, and his son may be a poet." And he continues to sing. And he starts to think on this, and he thinks, it's not Edward's army, it's George's army. And he looks at Claire, and as she's looking at Jamie, it's the same proud army with which she had once fought, the proud army with which his father had died. He felt a catch at his throat and forced air from down deep, singing through it fiercely. "I will be a warrior, that my son may be a merchant, and his son may be a poet." Neither Adams nor Jefferson had fought. Jefferson had no son. He had been the poet, whose words had echoed through the years, raised armies, burned in the hearts of those who would die for them and for the country founded on them. And then Roger takes a total non sequitur. Perhaps it's the hair, Roger thought ironically, seeing the gleam of ruddy light as Jamie moved, watching silently over the thing he had started, some Viking tinge in the blood that gave those tall, fiery men the gift of rousing men to war. And then the line, that fought and died for your wee bit hill and glen. So they had, so they would again, he thought. For that was what men always fought for, wasn't it? Home and family. Bree holding Jemmy by the pig bones, and you could see her in the firelight. And if Roger found himself now barred to a displaced Highland chieftain, still he must try also to be a warrior when the time came, for the sake of his son and those who would come after. So Roger is experiencing some profound thoughts while he's singing. He's probably not the only one experiencing this. He was the vehicle through this music that Jamie was trying to build this. This is it. And he has never experienced it until now. He's from the 20th century. He didn't see any of the prior wars. Not himself. He doesn't know what that means. And now this spark is in him and he understands. And he gets it. And so the very act that he is doing to compel the crowd has compelled him as well. As a father, as someone who's, quote, an immigrant to this country, right? I think it's really beautiful. And I'm a firm believer that in order to reach somebody's brain, in order to compel them with critical thinking and all these wonderful things like facts and data and etc., right? You have to reach someone's heart first. You can't simply make a call to arms, a call to duty. You can't simply have people follow. Like, you can't even explain to somebody what it's like to be a father until that baby is put in their hands and it compels them by the heart. Not just duty, not just loyalty, not because they're the dad. They do it because their heart is spoken to. It bursts open. And so what he is doing is he's the facilitator of the heart. He's reminding people. Because even though some of those immigrants didn't come from the Highlands, right? Didn't come from Scotland that are there. That they've all experienced things. They've seen what this means in some capacity. And Roger deftly spoke to their heart so Jamie could speak to their head and to those other parts. It's fantastic. Okay, next up is chapter 25, The Angeling of My Rest. That title comes from a prayer that we're going to get, and I'm going to read that prayer because it's so beautiful. I should copy and paste it into my post, or at least a link to one. It's stunning. Okay, so this is really interesting. The first line of this chapter, late as it was, we made love by unspoken consent, each wanting the refuge and reassurance of the other's flesh. Okay. They have left the crowd below. They are secure in their private bedroom, shutters closed, in their own intimate space. This is one of the languages of Jamie and Claire. Their communication partly is through their physical interaction because there's such spiritual element to it. It's so intimate. It is so just open. They don't hide any part of themselves during the process. And that's a really beautiful thing. And I hope in your life, that in your sexual life, that you have experienced something that transcends the physical and is spiritual and psychological, and it's the most trusting place you can be, the most vulnerable place. It is scary and it is beautiful. And to have that level of openness and true intimacy and communion with someone, it's beyond words almost. But I think that's what they experience. And when we see this little portion here, they're preparing for something. This is a fortifying act for them. I wish you could see me. I'm totally talking with my hands and making expressions and trying to show you things with my hands. So maybe you can just hear what I'm doing. I don't know. Imagine it. Imagine it. What I must look like right now. But this is a fortifying act. It makes them feel safe and secure. It makes them feel grounded. It adds that trust in, that faithfulness, that loyalty. It's a place where they can be completely 100% naked in all aspects of self. To have a space like that with another human being is precious, and I think probably pretty rare. But that's what they have, and this just creates a space, and it creates something solid around them. And it's reassuring. You know how Claire was going through all her things of checklists, and is everything fine? Do we have enough food? That was one of her ways of preparing to leave on this trip that they're taking. It's her kind of surgical thing that she has to do. I have to go through my processes. I have to go through my checklist. I have to make sure. And then she feels like, okay, what I can secure, I've secured. What is controllable is managed, and that's the best I can do. But I left it in good stead. I've made sure everything is fine. That's one of the keys to her preparation. And this seals it for her. This is like, okay, now they're moving into a transition in the morning. And this makes Jamie covered. It's, again, that safety, security. It's home. She's home. And with her by his side, he can do anything. He has to muster strength. This requires courage. And this gives them courage and strength and fortitude. And it's their last time they're going to have privacy for a while. I mean, they're not a couple who worries about making love under the stars, but she's really most likely the only woman, unless there's one or two more who comes to cook for the men, where they're going, she's it. He's the only one with companionship, so they do have to be discreet because it's really rude to the other men who are doing without their honey. Or there's no one available to them. And the interesting thing about this to me, I'm still on this front page, right, of this chapter, is that Roger is still singing. He's still performing because the crowd loves him, but it's part of that action that he was doing. Through what he's doing, he is fortifying people, making them feel safe, making them feel secure, making them give them courage, right? He's propelling that plan forward while Jamie can go rest in Claire's arms. But what about Roger and Brianna? Roger has to leave in the morning too, so they need to wrap that up so she can put that baby to bed, and then they can have their own time. Because they need that too, because Brianna's not going with Roger. She doesn't get to face those dangers. She stays home, which is real. I think staying home is harder than going. Because when you stay home and you have to keep the hearth fires burning and everything going and safe, you're constantly worried about the person who's gone. The person who's gone is just going to do whatever needs to be done. They're in the action. Though they worry they have something they have to do that's going to take precedence in their head, in their actions, in their mind. They don't have the capacity or the ability to worry about what's going on at home. So I think those who stay home, gosh, true warriors, because it's so hard. And they need to have that bridge so they can be connected while they're gone. Apart from each other and Roger's gone. So Jamie is hungry. He didn't eat dinner. And he reminds Claire, and I put on my notes that this was Jamie's physical reaction before, ... that he didn't eat because it upsets his tummy. And normally Claire has a drawer where they keep hard cheese and apples and, some snacks in. I love that they have a snack drawer in their room where they're staying. Or if they're like in an inn or something, then they're staying for a while. They keep extras in there so they don't have to bother the kitchen. But she didn't have anything up there right now. And so she was going to go and get food. But Jamie was like, don't you leave me. I can hold till breakfast. I want to be with you. I want to be in here. And no, we're not breaking this moment for my hungry belly. Which I love that. And Claire is having a hard time falling asleep. She's really restless. I like what she says here. Despite my tiredness and the serious nature of the journey, I was looking forward to it. Beyond the lure of novelty and the possibility of adventure, there was the delightful prospect of escape from laundry, cookery, and female warfare. All the women and Mrs. Bug, fighting with everybody. Still, Jamie was right. Tonight was likely the last we would have of privacy and comfort for some little time. Don't break this moment. Keep it intact as long as possible. Stay in your bubble. So they just start having some general conversation, right? And the sounds are getting quieter and quieter outside. Everything is going down. People are settling in. They have an early rise in the morning. And she can't sleep. So she says, can you remember everything you did today? This was a small game we played sometimes at night, each trying to recall in detail everything done, seen, heard, or eaten during the day, from getting up to going to bed. Like writing in a journal, the effort of recall seemed to purge the mind of the day's exertions, and we found great entertainment in each other's experiences. I loved to hear Jamie's daily accounts, whether pedestrian or exciting, but he wasn't in the mood tonight. He just squeezes her. He's like, all I remember is your fine, juicy booty. That's what he's thinking. So she's like, fine, you don't want to talk. I get that way where my brain is like, brrr. My husband's like, oh my God, can we just go to sleep, honey? But I think that's cute. I think that'd be fun to do. When it's not like at the point where you really should be going to sleep. But that would be a good activity. Have any of you done this with your partner? Maybe I'll do this with my husband and see what he says. So Claire's brain is just going, and now she's like, are they going to destroy the surgery? Is Mrs. Bug going to fight with everybody? And her brain is like very loud. And he says, you're thinking so loudly I can hear you from over here. Or are you only counting sheep? I was counting pigs, he informed me, and doing nicely too. Only I kept catching sight of that white creature from the corner of my eye, skipping to and fro just out of reach, taunting me. But Claire is just struggling, and he's like, the house isn't going to burn down, everything's fine. And then this little tidbit I found really intriguing that happens next, and I called it a bedtime devotion brought on by a memory. When Frank and I were married, we went to be counseled by a priest. He advised us to begin our married life by saying the rosary together in bed each night. Frank said he wasn't sure whether this was meant to be devotion, an aid to sleep, or only a church-sanctioned method of birth control. Jamie was silently laughing at this. Well, we could try it if you like, Sassenach, though you'll have to keep count of the Hail Marys. You're lying on my left hand and my fingers have gone numb. Not that, I don't think, I said, but perhaps a prayer. Do you know any good going-to-bed prayers? Of course, Jamie knows every prayer ever written by anyone. Aye, lots. Let me think a bit. So he comes up with a prayer, and it's getting quieter and quieter outside, and he gets him comfortable, and he starts. Bless to me, O God, the moon that is above me. Bless to me, O God, the earth that is beneath me. Bless to me, O God, my wife and my children. And bless, O God, myself, who have care of them. Bless to me my wife and my children. And bless, O God, myself, who have care of them. Bless, O God, the thing on which mine eyes doth rest. Bless, O God, the thing on which my hope doth rest. Bless, O God, my reason and my purpose. Bless, O bless thou them, thou God of life. Bless, O God, my reason and my purpose. Bless, O bless thou them, thou God of life. His hand smoothed the curve of my hip, lifted to stroke my hair. Bless to me the bed companion of my love. Bless to me the handling of my hands. Bless, O bless thou to me, O God, the fencing of my defense. And bless, O bless to me the angeling of my rest. Bless, O bless thou to me, O God, the fencing of my defense. And bless, O bless to me the angeling of my rest. His hand lay still, curled under my chin. I wrapped my own hand round his and sighed deeply. Oh, I like that, especially the angeling of my rest. When Bree was small, we'd put her to bed with an angel prayer. May Michael be at my right, Gabriel at my left, Uriel behind me, Raphael before me, and above my head the presence of the Lord. A little later, Jamie gets out of bed and he says it's nothing. He just meant to write a note. December 1st, 1770. James Fraser, Esquire, to Lord John Gray. And he's sending it to Mount Josiah Plantation, where Lord John is. And I'm not going to read the entire thing. Maybe I will. I don't know. We'll see. I love how Jamie starts this. My Lord, I write in hopes that all continues well with your establishment and its inhabitants. My particular regard to your son. All are well in my house and, so far as I am aware, at River Run as well. The nuptials planned for my daughter and my aunt, of which I wrote you, were unexpectedly interfered with by circumstance, principally a circumstance by the name of Mr. Randall Lillywhite, whose name I mention in case it may one day pass your cognizance. But my grandchildren were fortunately christened, and while my aunt's wedding has been postponed to a later season, my daughter's union with Mr. Mackenzie was solemnized by the courtesy of the Reverend Mr. Caldwell, a worthy gentleman, though Presbyterian. Now he shares the baby's name, young Jeremiah Alexander Ian Fraser Mackenzie. The name Ian is, of course, the Scottish variant of John, my daughter's compliment to a friend as well as her cousin. To Lord John. He's in good health, and he says the baby has 4 teeth. Oh, the child bites like a crocodile. He talks about the growth and the expansion of the Ridge, and that there are 20 additional families, that they have prospered. They have abundance of corn and hay and beasts to consume them. I estimate the hogs running at large in my wood to number no fewer than 40 at present. 2 cows have borne calves, and I have bought a new horse. This animal's character lies in grave doubt, but his wind does not. Thus, my good news. I love the writing style. So now he goes on to explain that he's a governor of militia, and he's supposed to help in putting down the hostilities. He talks to him about the regulators, etc., the Hillsborough violence, and Tryon. Okay, so this, after he goes through all of that, he says, such remarks bring me to the true point of this missive. I expect no evil outcome of the present enterprise, and yet you are a soldier too, even as I am. And what catastrophe may spring from trivial beginnings. No one can know the particulars of his own end, save that he will have one. Thus, I have made such provisions as I can for the welfare of my family. So he goes through, he's basically sending his last will and testament to John, explaining who needs to be taken care of, what needs to happen, and that will be off in the morning. And then, postscriptum. My thanks for the intelligence you provide in answer to my earlier query regarding Stephen Bonnet. I note your accompanying advice with the greatest appreciation and gratitude for its kind intent, though as you suspect, it will not sway me. Postscriptum. Copies of my will and testament and of the papers pertaining to my property and affairs and in Scotland would be found with Farquhar Campbell of Green Oaks near Cross Creek. So Jamie gets out of bed as his last act before leaving for the skirmish to send Lord John his basic last will and testament. I mean, it was truncated, and here's where you go if I die. That's pretty amazing that this friendship that started out so precarious in a prison, lo, those many years before, and was fractured by John's admiration and love for him, his desire for Jamie. It was just torn asunder. And though it's not in the Outlander book series proper in The Scottish Prisoner, we see how their relationship was rebuilt. If you don't read any of the extra books outside of the Outlander series, read The Scottish Prisoner. I actually did a read-along for that last year. I think it's 26 episodes maybe. I'd have to look. But read it. It really gives us the detail of how they went from that animosity and that everything that happened between them and got further busted. Like, they started another friendship, right? And then there was Willie. Like, John put Jamie at the household because he was still a paroled prisoner. And then along came Willie. And it shows how they brought themselves to each other again, how they reconnected, bonded, and made some peace with the discomfort in the relationship. And interestingly, I mean, he's Jamie's best friend outside of Claire. Murtaugh's gone. Most of Jamie's family's gone. His aunt is treacherous. And though there are people that he holds very dear, John is his closest friend. And their relationship has had to overcome massive obstacles, besides the fact that John comes from an upper crusty family, English family, right? Soldier. There's a lot of complication in their relationship. Religion. Yeah. Country of origin. Yeah. You just keep making the list. It shouldn't really work. But they share a love of books and learning. They share the same kind of loyalty, honor, and duty. Jamie and John are actually so similar that how could they not be besties? But again, there's this huge complications based on Jamie's history, based on culture, based on just John being who he is. That it really took a lot of work, and they had to walk a lot of fire to forge the relationship that they have. And for Jamie to send John this letter outlining the basics of his last will and testament is, huge. And the fact that he would send it off the ridge to a third party, I think, is really fascinating. There's a lot of security in that. But he has to really rely that somebody will get that post to John. But he's not leaving it with Mr. Bug, who's overseeing the property. He's not leaving it with Brianna. So you have to really, kind of sit there and think about the gravity of this letter and what it means. And I think it's really interesting how formal it is on one hand, but there's very personal touches within the letter. And man, for Jamie to write as well with his busted up hand, it's very difficult for him to write. How long would it have taken with a quill to write that letter to John? Probably quite some time. I would say that was probably at least an hour or more. So we're moving into a new section of the book, and part 3 is called Alarms and Excursions. So we're temporarily moving out of home and hearth. We're moving out of the daily life. We're moving into the duty part of what he is responsible for, and the heaviness of what he's doing, because he knows he's going to have to switch at some point. And Brianna probably knows better than anybody when that switch should take place. I mean, Claire's a foreigner. Roger's a foreigner. I mean, just because they know history a little bit, they know, British history, but American history, neither one of their strong suits. So this is a really pivotal point in history. Just like Roger talking about how the Ku Klux Klan started and saying how things have to start, like the ember. The idea, the spark has to start somewhere. And Jamie had said prior that even if this isn't the official start of the American Revolution, it's the start. It's that one ember that can light something else on fire. One, that's all it takes. And I love that image I can see in my head right now. So, I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I love the fact that we only really had 4 characters that we paid attention to. 4 in 3 chapters. Roger, Brianna, Claire, and Jamie. Everything else was outside of our vision. I mean, there's a few names thrown out there, but we didn't really interact. So our core four is who we had in these 3 chapters. And I love that because we're really expanding characters. We're really getting to know them better through their kind of moments that we're getting access to. And that we got Jamie's point of view, we got Claire's point of view, we got Roger's point of view, we got some of Brianna's point of view. So we got to see all of their perspectives. And I also love that Roger's reaction to the cross was totally of a historian. Like, he was like, that's like awesome. And Brianna's going, you didn't live here. I'm an American. So it's fascinating because Roger can look at something and view it through the eyes of almost detachment, where he is not putting his own mores onto the situation, using that sort of historicism to view culture. And even though they're talking about the future of what's going to happen, he's looking at the possible effects of this one thing that happened because it's from the old world. And it was very uncommon to happen, but when it did, it was really serious and got people's attention. So it's fascinating, the differences in just their own personal backgrounds, professional backgrounds, that would make such a difference. Okay, so next podcast, we will be deep into them going on to their like wild adventure and trying to deal with the regulators. So I look forward to doing that one. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Like I said, again, there are links to the songs down at the bottom, and you can go through and enjoy and imagine Roger singing them or Richard Rankin singing them. It's really, really fun. And I want to give a couple of shout outs to Jenny Jackson, who became a monthly patron through Patreon, and Sharon Hamilton. You guys are amazing. Every single dollar counts. And again, it's patreon.com/A Dram of Outlander. And I appreciate you immensely because every little bit that is donated to the podcast, I can keep the podcast up and running, keep the website, make sure my equipment is in good standing, and I appreciate you tremendously. So if you have any comments, thoughts, questions, bones to pick with me, contact at adramaofoutlander.com or 719-425-9444 is the listener line. Please leave me a voice message. You can always leave me a private message on the Facebook group or page. And you can also find me on Instagram and Twitter under Dram of Outlander. And the website, of course, is adramaofoutlander.com. I know, a Dram of Outlander Facebook page and group. It's obviously, I'm real imaginative with the names and how we do them. So, have a fantastic week. And until next time, Slán Java.